Music and astronomy. This universe we live in is reliable in certain ways. If you drop something off a cliff, it's always going to fall. Most everyone in the world agrees that there are universal principles that govern the universe. People spend most of their lives trying to conquer or master a certain aspect of the universe and have satisfaction. Others don't. Early philosophers contemplated why things are the way they are. Much like Pythagoras and his brotherhood, they figured that it's numbers that ruled everything, including music. The theory of correlation between music and the cosmos was thought up by Pythagoras, taught to the Pythagorean brotherhood and based on a principle of how strings vibrate. Pythagoras was born on the island of Samos around 570 BC, Vogel 24, which is odd to some considering it's closer to Turkey than to Greece. Pythagoras began his studies under Thales and Anaximander, Vogel 20. Thales a mathematician and Anaximander a philosopher. He is 18 years old when he goes to study outside of Samos. After 4 years he goes to Egypt where he spends the next 22 years. Vogel 20. The word philosophy literally translates to the love of knowledge, so of course Pythagoras kept up his search for it. About 530 BC he settled in Crotona, a Greek colony in southern Italy, where he founded a movement with religious, political, and philosophical aims, known as Pythagoreanism. The philosophy of Pythagoras is known only through the work of his disciples. Bram 447. He had essentially developed a school of thought. They studied math and music theory, but there was three main areas: basic doctrine, theory of numbers, and astronomy. The basic doctrine was very individualized and personal, having to do more with governing one's own life, obedience and silence, abstinence from food, simplicity in dress and possessions, and the habit of frequent self-examination were prescribed. Bram 447. Very minimalist in its convictions, obviously meant for someone out to gain insight rather than fill his bank account. The second is the theory of numbers. They set out to prove in a multitude of ways that numbers rule the cosmos. Among the extensive mathematical investigations carried on by the Pythagoreans were their studies of odd and even numbers and of prime and square numbers. From the arithmetical standpoint, they cultivated the concept of number, which became for the principle of all proportion, order, and harmony in the universe. Bram 447. The last main area is astronomy. He had a theory that the celestial bodies were spaced apart like the crucial parts of strings when plucked. These intervals are generated by the simplest possible ratios. For example, when a string is divided, segments whose lengths are in the ratio 2, 1 sound an octave, 3, 2 a fifth, and 4, 3 a fourth. Burkholder et al. 13. Pythagoras held to his belief system as he pressed forward on his philosophical quest for knowledge. Because the Pythagoreans thought that the heavenly bodies are separated from one another by intervals corresponding to the harmonic lengths of the strings, they held that the movement of the spheres gives rise to a musical sound harmony of the spheres. Bram 447. The basis of the theory is primarily elementary. The string theory he demonstrated with a piece of equipment called a monochord, James 36. His point was music contains in its essence a mystery. Everyone agrees that it communicates, but how? James 17. He wanted to show the importance of this theory more than the mathematical prowess. Pythagoras invented the monochord to demonstrate to his students of music theory the harmonic laws. James 36. They spent many a days contemplating how music could have the power that it does. How could it wield such emotion? And it is only a system of numbers filtered through sound. It is true that music is a form of symbolic language, but it is of an entirely different species than the symbolism of language. James 17. As the years progressed, his followers grew in numbers and stature. By the time a man named Robert Flood was curious about his theories and longing to expand on them, the monochord had reached an almost godly level. It was now the divine monochord or celestial monochord. Either way, it had become more than a mere tool for studying string intervals. And here is the photo he left behind of Pythagoras's divine monochord. James 129. The theory was well understood and widely accepted by most of the Mediterranean world, in fact, taken very seriously amongst the elite and commoners. The Pythagorean conception of the universe as a musical numerical system rapidly became the standard throughout the Mediterranean world. James 60. People started to relate the theory itself to the religious getting closer to God. Yet Cicero clearly makes the connection between skilled men, homines docti, who are able to imitate the music of the spheres on stringed instruments or with their voices are permitted to return to heaven. James 65. Pythagoras and Plato completely identified. Mathematics, music and philosophy. The first two are essential preparations for the last, and all three are aspects of what every enlightened person understood science to be a state of knowing. James 66. Sounds like they didn't want people to go crazy. They just wanted people to be more aware of the world they inhabited. They studied all of the esoteric sciences available to them at the time. Sacred geometry, Metatron's cube, the Fibonacci sequence, Vitruvian man, and even some he made up, such as the one he is most famous for, the Pythagorean theorem, a formula still used in geometry classes all over the world today. A plus B equals C. Bram 447. Indeed, useful insights came from this philosopher, so much so that the Romans resurrected his teachings to incorporate them in everyday Roman life and teachings. They felt they almost a birthright to them. It was appropriate that Rome become one of the centers in the renewed interest in Pythagoras and his teachings. The Pythagorean order was, after all, created in the Italian peninsula, in Magna Graecia. Aristotle and later authors regularly refer to its teaching as the Italian philosophy. Con 86. The theory of correlation between music and the cosmos was thought up by Pythagoras, taught to the Pythagorean Brotherhood, and based on a principle of how strings vibrate. The topic is a very interesting one, to say that though a person attempting to research it might bite off more than they can chew. It is quite humble writing about someone with such a grand influence on this society. There is a lot more to this subject, more followers who added to his theories and ideals, and I am positive they won't be the last. Thank you for watching, and please, like and subscribe.